Imagine waking up rich, then going to bed broke. No war, no clear warning, just a terrifying crash that wiped out billions and sent America spiraling into a decade of hunger and dust. But what truly happened? And crucially, why did it unfold that way? Let's rewind to the party before the fall.
Imagine waking up in 1922. The war is over, the mustaches are ridiculous, and the economy? It's vibing. Factories are no longer making tanks, they're making toasters, vacuum cleaners, and the kind of refrigerators that say ice boxes are for peasants. New York's skyline shoots up like it's on steroids. Jazz music becomes the Wi-Fi of the 20s. Loud, everywhere, and nobody fully understands how it works. The economy is booming. People genuinely believe the good times will last forever. Even economists said something like, "Trust me, this decade is absolutely roaring."
And the engines of growth, they're humming. The Model T rolls off assembly lines faster than ever, thanks to Henry Ford's moving belt innovation. Cars flood the streets, auto plants explode with demand. Oil, steel, rubber, every linked industry gets pulled into the slipstream. The American economy isn't just growing, it's revving. As cities flourish with electricity and luxury, America falls in love with gadgets like radios. 10 million homes have radios by 1929.
But while cities are partying, rural America is struggling to even get on the dance floor. Farmers, once rich from wartime demand, now face plummeting prices. So they borrow to modernize, but the shiny new tractors don't save them. They just help them go broke slightly faster.
Meanwhile, urban America discovers its new favorite hobby, buying stuff they can't afford. Welcome to the era of buy now, pay later. Want a radio? Finance it. A car? Finance it. Stock in a company that makes hats for dogs? Definitely finance it. Banks, thrilled by this innovation, offer installment plans to anyone with a pulse. It's the financial equivalent of saying, "Sure, I'll marry you. We've been on 2 dates."
But the true heart of the mania lies in Wall Street. The stock market becomes Disneyland for adults. Margin loans let anyone buy $100 of stock with just $10 down. The remaining $90? Who cares? It's the future. Stocks only go up, right? Even the barber knew. Trust me, kid, utilities are hot. I made a killing in socks, or stocks. You know things are bad when your barber, your butcher, and your dog all start giving stock tips. Between 1924 and 1929, the Dow Jones quadruples. Stock prices break free from gravity. Fundamentals? Why look at profits when you can look at vibes? This line is going up, and so is my self-esteem.
Companies get creative too. They set up holding companies that own other holding companies that own absolutely nothing. It's just layers of nothing and a whole lot of stock hype. A few people try to sound the alarm. Economist Roger Babson warns in 1929 a crash is coming. Wall Street responds by buying more stock and telling Roger to go touch grass. Nobody hears him over the sound of cash and optimism. Meanwhile, behind the champagne and jazz, cracks are forming. Rural debt climbs. Consumer debt balloons. The economy's partying on the cliff's edge, and nobody's checking if the floorboards can hold. But hey, don't worry. It's 1929. What could possibly go wrong? October 29th, 1929. America woke up rich and went to bed broke.
Yes, we are.
That day would go down in history as Black Tuesday. The stock market didn't just fall. It performed a flawless 10-meter dive into concrete. The Dow plummeted. Ticker tape spit out red numbers like they were possessed. Phones rang non-stop. Suits screamed. Traders fainted. One guy reportedly had a heart attack.
recovered, looked at his portfolio, and had another. $14 billion of wealth vanished. Adjusted for inflation, that's over $200 billion. Not monopoly money, real homes, savings, college funds, hopes and dreams, gone. Outside the stock exchange, crowds gathered in stunned silence. Some held hands, some cried. Others just stared at the ground, trying to understand how an entire economy had tripped over its own shoelaces. The Roaring Twenties hadn't just ended. They had face-planted into a brick wall while carrying everyone's retirement plan. So where did all that money go? And why did it happen so suddenly? This is how a financial crisis unravels.
First came the margin calls. During the boom, people had been buying stocks on borrowed money. Put $10 down, get $100 worth of shares. Great until the market tanks and your broker wants the other $90 immediately. Investors scrambled. Many had nothing left to repay. Paper fortunes vanished overnight. People who had been rich on Monday were bankrupt by Thursday. To cover these calls, people had to sell more assets, driving prices even lower in a vicious cycle.
And then came the banks. Oh, the banks. These grand institutions, pillars of trust, marble floors, oak desks. Turns out they were built on worthless paper and blind optimism. As the stock market imploded, banks couldn't get their loans back. So they did the obvious thing, collapse. And the people, they ran, not jogged, not briskly walked, ran. Bank runs broke out like wildfire. Crowds surged outside local branches, banging on locked doors, screaming for their savings. Inside, tellers tried to calm them down. Everyone, please, your money is completely safe. Okay, not completely. Entire families lost everything. Grandpa's bonds? Worthless. Aunt Margaret's savings? Gone. Little Timmy's piggy bank's still full, but only because no one had the heart to tell him that he was now the wealthiest person in the household.
So, where did the money go? It didn't disappear from Earth, it simply became illiquid or was transferred. Assets, like stocks or real estate, lost their perceived value. Loans couldn't be repaid, and the cash that people thought they had in banks wasn't physically there because banks lend out deposits. When everyone wanted their money back at once, the system froze. Wealth didn't vanish into thin air. It either became valueless or moved into the hands of a few who could snap up distressed assets for pennies on the dollar. The disaster didn't stop at America's shores. U.S. banks, panicking, called in their overseas loans. European economies, already duct-taped together after World War I, were thrown into a blender. Germany's fragile recovery collapsed. Britain wobbled. And then there was this, tariffs. In 1930, the U.S. passed the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act. Essentially, it put massive taxes on imported goods to protect American industries. Sounds good, but other countries retaliated by doing the same, causing global trade, once the great artery of prosperity, to choke and fall by half in just 3 years. And yet, amidst the panic came the denial. Newspapers printed sunny headlines. Market adjusts as investors take profits. Politicians insisted the worst was over. President Herbert Hoover appeared on radio broadcasts, calm as ever, assuring the American people that the economy was fundamentally sound. Meanwhile, millions sat at empty dinner tables and wondered which part of that sentence was supposed to help. Even though Roger Babson had warned Hoover, his advice was largely ignored, and others in government also perpetuated the problem. Crucially, many economists later argued that the Federal Reserve,
meant to be the economy's guardian, failed to act decisively to stabilize the banking system and provide liquidity, which only worsened the crisis. And still, the system didn't stop. It just staggered forward, broken, clueless, pretending the crash wasn't the bottom, it was just the beginning.
By 1931, the music was completely gone. The lights were off. The party was over. And what came next wasn't silence. It was the sound of factories grinding to a halt, of fathers whispering apologies they never thought they'd have to say, of America exhaling all at once and realizing it had nothing left to breathe in. Unemployment soared to 25%. 1 in every 4 Americans who wanted to work couldn't. Jobs vanished like smoke. Detroit, once the industrial crown jewel, watched its auto plants shutter one by one. Production collapsed by 75%.
Cities sagged under the weight of need. Bread lines, endless and quiet, snaked through downtowns. Mothers lined up at dawn for a bowl of thin soup. Children fainted in class, not from boredom but from hunger. America wasn't starving metaphorically, it was starving literally. Desperation crept into every room. Banks had failed. Savings were gone. Dignity was thinning. The suicide rate surged. And just when it seemed things couldn't get worse, the sky turned black in the Great Plains. Years of aggressive farming had stripped the land bare. Crucially, this was compounded by a severe drought. When the rain stopped, the soil cracked. Then came the winds. Dust storms swept across the heartland, towering, choking, biblical black blizzards, they were called. They didn't just cover the ground, they blotted out the sun. Crops were buried, livestock suffocated, homes filled with dust. Families coughed through the night and woke up coated in the earth that used to feed them.
Millions fled. They packed everything they had into broken-down cars and drove west, chasing rumors of jobs in land that hadn't yet turned to sand. California or bust, the signs read. But for many, it was just bust.
In Washington, President Hoover tried to hold the center. He encouraged volunteerism, offered modest relief programs. He even launched the Hoover Dam, an engineering marvel. But he refused large-scale federal aid, called it dangerous, called it un-American. But by then, people had stopped listening. His name became shorthand for suffering. Hoovervilles, shanty towns made of scrap and cardboard. Hoover blankets, newspapers used for warmth. Hoover carts, cars with no tires, pulled by mules. His legacy wasn't just concrete and engineering. It was cold, hunger, and dust.
And then something cracked. Summer 1932, thousands of World War I veterans, desperate and forgotten, marched to Washington. They had been promised bonuses for their service, but they needed them now. They built a tent city outside the Capitol and waited, peacefully. Congress said no, Hoover said no, and then the army came. Tear gas was fired, camps were burned, families fled into the smoke. The government had turned its weapons on its own heroes.
Radicalism spread. Socialist rallies, communist recruitment, not because people believed in theory, but because capitalism had left them with nothing but hunger. Crime surged. Bank robbers like Dillinger and Bonnie and Clyde were seen not as villains, but as folk heroes. People who struck back at the institutions that had betrayed everyone else. America wasn't just broke, it was broken.
By March 1933, Franklin Delano Roosevelt stood at the podium for his inauguration. Millions leaned in. The only thing we have to fear is fear itself, he said. It was more than a speech. It was the first deep breath the country had taken in years.
Roosevelt didn't wait. Within weeks, young men in threadbare clothes were handed shovels, tents, and purpose. The Civilian Conservation Corps put them to work. You're here to plant trees and save the country. In that order. The Works Progress Administration soon followed. Millions hired to build roads, bridges, schools, post offices. They didn't just rebuild infrastructure, they rebuilt pride. In the Tennessee Valley, FDR launched the TVA. Dams went up, lights flicked on. Whole towns that had lived in darkness began to glow. Families gathered around radios not because they could finally afford one, but because for the first time they had electricity to plug one in. Slowly, unmistakably, life stirred. GDP rose, unemployment crept downward. The dust settled, literally and figuratively. People dared to imagine a future again. But FDR didn't stop at jobs. He wanted to fix the machine, not just oil it. So he built rules. The SEC to keep Wall Street from doing Wall Street things, and the FDIC to protect your money from disappearing again. Banks reopened, but this time people weren't running in to withdraw everything in a panic.
Thank you for your patience.
They were depositing, quietly, hopefully. Then came Social Security. It didn't make anyone rich. It didn't need to. It said, you matter. We'll remember you. You won't have to work until you collapse. It wasn't flashy, but it was monumental. Even the arts got a job. The Federal Arts Project paid painters, photographers, and writers to capture the soul of a recovering nation. One photo, Migrant Mother, by Dorothea Lange, became the face of it all. Her eyes didn't say, we're saved. They said, we're surviving. Hollywood chimed in too. People packed into theaters to watch The Wizard of Oz, where a gray world turned to color. In the middle of a depression, Americans still dreamed, maybe more than ever.
Cities buzzed again. Restaurants reopened. Radios played swing music. And if you squinted just a little, the skyline looked like it was rising again. In the distance, factories started humming, but this time not just with consumer goods. Helmets, boots, ammunition. The world was shifting again, and America was starting to stir, not just for recovery, but for something bigger.
Crucially, while the New Deal provided immense relief and reformed the system, many historians and economists argue that the massive rearmament and industrial mobilization for World War II were the primary forces that truly ended the Great Depression, bringing America back to full employment and full production by 1941. The Great Depression didn't end with a celebration. It ended with work, with blistered hands and tired backs, with legislation, hope, and a little jazz, with a nation that had collapsed, choosing piece by piece to rise again. But as America stood back up, it didn't realize that something else was already on the horizon, something darker, louder, global, and this time the whole world would feel it.